Welcome to the legal system. Normally, it exists to keep order. But sometimes it only exists because someone at some point did something so unbelievably dumb that the government had to step in and go, nope, we're putting that in writing. In the US, with federal, state, and county laws stacked on top of each other, rules can get so weirdly specific you start wondering what disaster happened right before the ink dried. And nothing inspires humanity's worst. Hold my beer ideas quite like hunting and fishing. These aren't made up laws, and this isn't a comedy sketch. This is a list of 30 laws that are real, or were real at some point. All right, let's get into it. 1. Picture this: you're traveling through wide open wilderness, and right in front of you is a bear sleeping peacefully. Most people see that and think, wow, lucky moment. Other people see that and think, if it opened its eyes, this photo would be perfect. And because that second group exists, this law exists. In Alaska, waking up a sleeping bear just to take a picture is illegal. Not because the bear is fragile, the bear is fine. The fragile thing here is the human, specifically the human with a smartphone and a desperate need to prove to the internet they were here. This law wasn't written for the majority of sane people. It was written for the small percentage who think nature is a film set, and they're the immortal main character. If you need a law to remind you that bothering an animal that can kill you in seconds is a bad idea, that's not a failure of biology education. That's the direct consequence of overvaluing a single photo. 2. Now follow this chain of reasoning that sounds almost logical, right up until it turns into legislation. Humans drink alcohol and humans get slower. Fish are living creatures. So if a fish drinks alcohol, it'll probably get slower too. And in Ohio, someone apparently decided to test that theory in real life. The end result wasn't a scientific breakthrough, it was a law banning people from getting fish drunk. This isn't a fable. This is the legal system's official response to humans being too bored and too creative at the same time. The best part is the law doesn't care how you plan to do it. It doesn't ask your method, it doesn't analyze your approach, it doesn't question your motives. Because once you're standing at the edge of a lake holding a beer and seriously considering intoxicating aquatic wildlife, we're past the point where follow up questions matter. This law exists to make sure that in the relationship between humans and fish, at least one side stays sober. 3. There's an English phrase, shooting fish in a barrel, meaning something so easy you barely have to think. In Wyoming, the government basically had to clarify that's a metaphor. You're not allowed to shoot fish with any kind of gun, especially not a machine gun. This law exists because at some point someone looked at a river, looked at a fish, looked at their firearm, and decided military-grade firepower was a reasonable solution. Not because fish were too fast, not because fishing was too difficult, probably because patience ran out before the ammo did. And it's not just about the fish. It's about stray bullets, flying metal, and the entire concept of public safety getting tossed out the window when you bring a machine gun to the riverbank. If you need a weapon designed to suppress an infantry squad just to catch dinner, the problem probably isn't the fish. This law is here to remind you that fishing is supposed to be relaxing. If it makes you consider a machine gun, the correct move is go to the grocery store. 4. Humans have invented fishing rods, net spears, traps, hundreds of ways to catch fish without putting your face in the water. And yet Pennsylvania still had to officially clarify something that shouldn't need clarifying: you can't catch fish with your mouth. The law doesn't ban using your hands. It doesn't ban spearing fish. It very specifically emphasizes that you shouldn't bite fish like you're a grizzly bear, which raises a deeply unsettling question: who did that before they had to write it down? Catching fish with your mouth isn't just dangerous, it's a bad decision on multiple levels. Fish have teeth. Fish carry parasites. And fish are under no obligation to cooperate with your plan. This law is society's polite way of saying humans don't need to compete directly with wildlife by lowering their own survival standards. If you feel the urge to bite a fish to prove something, the law has decided to intervene before Darwin gets a chance to do his job. 5. In human history, throwing rocks was once a technological breakthrough. The problem is that a breakthrough happened a few 100,000 years ago, and yet in some US states, the government still had to officially declare you can't throw rocks to catch fish. Not because the government hates rocks, and not because fish are emotionally delicate. It exists because someone looked at shallow water, saw a fish hovering there, picked up a rock, and decided they had reinvented hunting. In that moment, the entire arc of human evolution got skipped with one confident arm swing. Throwing rocks at fish isn't just risky for fish, it's risky for everyone nearby because rocks don't come with guidance systems. This law is modern society's polite way of saying we have tools, regulations, and supermarkets now. You don't need to act like you're trying to survive the Ice Age. If your method of getting dinner forces other people to duck flying objects, the issue probably isn't the fish. It's that you're somehow less advanced than the tool you're holding. 6. The American cowboy image comes with a lasso perfect throws and that whole taming the frontier fantasy. But there's a point where the fantasy hits a brick wall anywhere the law has to specifically say you are not allowed to fish with a lasso. It sounds cinematic. A cowboy on the riverbank whipping a loop into the water, yanking a fish onto shore while dramatic music swells. The only issue is that fish are not cattle. They don't stand still, they don't politely cooperate, and they definitely don't respect the heroic script in your head. None of that stopped a few people from trying, which is how we ended up with a law that basically exists to keep Hollywood from becoming a legal fishing method. A lasso in the water is the perfect recipe for tangled rope a trip to the ER and an ego that takes serious damage. This law is just a reminder that not every iconic skill transfers to every living thing. If your cowboy dream requires turning fish into livestock, the legal system regrets to inform you you need to update the fantasy for reality. 7. There's a fragile moment between I'm just outside relaxing and I'm the reason this rule exists. In Chicago, that moment apparently happened when someone decided to go fishing. In pajamas. Biologically speaking, fish don't care what you're wearing. They have no concept of pajama pants, flip-flops, or a fuzzy robe with a panda on it. Humans, however, do. And this law exists to protect what little we have left of the idea of public space. At some point, enough people showed up at the water's edge holding a fishing rod while still dressed like they just rolled out of bed that the city had to step in. This isn't about making life harder for outdoorsy people. It's about not turning the lakeshore into a shared extension of everyone's bedroom. Fishing is relaxing, sure, but it still happens in front of other humans. And once your personal comfort starts making everyone around you uncomfortable, the law tends to appear. Not to protect the fish, just to remind you society runs on a minimum level of wearing real pants. 8. Before drones became the new headache for hunting laws, people had already found an older, more biological workaround birds. In New York, lawmakers had to clarify that you can't fish by having a bird do the work for you. The idea is honestly creative: train a bird to dive, grab a fish, and bring it back. No bait, no patience, and most importantly, no admitting you're standing there while another creature does the hardest part. Technically, a fish still gets caught. Spiritually, that's not fishing anymore. That's outsourcing. This law exists to protect the concept of you did it yourself. If you're on shore sipping coffee while a bird operates like a winged drone under your command, you've turned the river into a biological delivery service. New York decided that the woods water and wildlife are not an on-demand logistics platform. If your win depends on someone else's beak and wings, the law is comfortable calling it cheating, not skill. 9. Some hunters bring rifles, some bring bows. And then there's the person who looks at a hyper little weasel and thinks, "You're my secret weapon." Which is exactly why some places ban using ferrets to hunt. Biologically, ferrets are perfect for it, small, fast, built for crawling into burrows and flushing animals out. But in the spirit of hunting, it's basically cheating by outsourcing. You're not hunting anymore, you're assigning the KPI to a four-legged hitman and collecting the results. This law didn't show up because the idea was rare. It showed up because people actually did it, releasing a fuzzy little special ops unit into the brush to drive small game into the open. That creates an unfair advantage, messes with ecosystems, and sometimes gets the ferret itself injured or lost as a piece of equipment dropped in the woods. The message is simple if you want to hunt face nature yourself. Don't turn an animal into a tool. The fluffy task force has been disbanded, and humans are reminded that skill isn't just buying extra teammates. 10. Here's a rule more reliable than the weather. If you hear an idea and think, no one would actually do that, the law has absolutely met the exact person who would. Electrify the whole lake to catch fish started right there. Someone looks at the world and goes, electricity stuns fish. So if I put electricity in the water, the fish will float up. Sounds efficient until you remember water doesn't pick targets. Electricity spreads. It hits everything living down there, from small fish to whatever innocent creature was just trying to exist. That's why laws banning electric fishing aren't just about protecting fish, they're about protecting the entire ecosystem and the person holding the device. Because this is one of the only sports where you can shock yourself before you shock a fish, it turns a river into a chaotic experiment where you trade skill for raw wattage. The law doesn't need a philosophical debate. It just blocks a terrible idea before it becomes a habit. If your fishing method sounds like running a power plant, the correct move is stop and go buy fish. 11. Once consumer drones got cheap, lightweight, and started coming with 4K cameras, somebody looked at the wilderness and thought hunting could finally upgrade the experience. Just launch the drone scan. The terrain tag the target, then walk straight to where the animal is standing. Fast, clean, efficient, and it completely nukes the entire concept of hunting. Laws banning drones for locating game didn't pop up because the tech was too new. They popped up because it was too convenient. Hunting has always leaned on the idea of fair chase. The animal and the hunter both need at least a remotely fair shot. A drone breaks that in minutes, turning the woods into a tactical map and the hunter into a remote operator. If you can sit in your truck, watch a screen, sip coffee, and know exactly where the animal is, you're not hunting. You're playing a real life FPS with live ammo. And the law basically had to remind people the outdoors is not your private server. This rule exists to keep hunting tied to time failure, luck, and patience. If you need GPS, lithium batteries, and spinning propellers to win, you don't need more tech. You need more patience. 12. Some laws are written to manage what's guaranteed to happen. Others get written as a precaution against something that shouldn't even exist. Banning the hunting of Bigfoot falls into that second category. In certain parts of the US, especially the Pacific Northwest, Bigfoot is protected like a real animal, not because there's rock solid scientific proof, because the government had to deal with an awkward reality. Some people truly believe Bigfoot is out there and they're willing to bring guns into the woods to find it. It sounds like a joke, but it solves multiple problems at once. If Bigfoot isn't real, the law helps prevent people from shooting other humans while hunting a legend. If Bigfoot is real, the law prevents people from shooting Bigfoot. Either way, it's better than letting someone run around the forest with live rounds chasing folklore. The wild part is that the authorities didn't just laugh it off, they wrote a law. Either they have an elite sense of humor, or they understand that when people believe a story hard enough, they'll act like it's true and the law has to stay one step ahead. 13. Hunting laws have a weird little paradox. It can be the exact same deer, but the moment it jumps into water, the law suddenly takes its side. In some states, shooting a deer while it's swimming is flat out illegal. It's not about sympathy, it's about principle. A deer in the water loses almost all its ability to defend itself. It can't pivot fast, it can't sprint away, and it doesn't have any real options besides keep swimming. At that point, firing on it isn't hunting. It's exploiting a situation where the animal is basically stuck. And yes, it accidentally creates a hilarious theoretical safe zone. If deer understood the law, all it would have to do for temporary immunity is dive into a lake. Water becomes a little demilitarized zone where the chase has to pause. This rule isn't here to celebrate deer swimming skills. It's here to protect the idea of fair chase. If your win only happens when the animal has been forced into helplessness, the law's saying that's not skill, it's just taking advantage of timing. 14. In the woods, deer are common game. But if that deer happens to be completely white, the rules suddenly change. In some places, hunting albino deer is strictly illegal, no exceptions. Biologically, an albino deer is just a rare mutation. Culturally, it's basically myth status. A white deer stepping out of the trees feels like something from a fairy tale, and lawmakers decided shooting it would ruin the entire moment, like scribbling over a painting because you felt like it. There's also a practical reason they're vulnerable. Albino deer are easier to spot, often weaker, and they disappear fast if they were hunted like normal. Without protection, you wouldn't see them for long. And honestly, this law also protects the hunter. Shooting a regular deer is hunting. Shooting a white deer is the fastest way to become the villain in every campfire story for the next decade. This time, the law steps in before you make the choice that turns you into that guy. 15. A cemetery is supposed to be about remembrance, quiet, and respect. And yet, at some point in history, someone looked at a graveyard and thought, it's quiet here, nobody will notice a shot. And that's how laws banning hunting in cemeteries ended up being necessary. This isn't philosophy. It's society's reflex to behave so bizarre it had to be written down. Hunting in a cemetery is dangerous and wildly inappropriate. You've got visitors, kids, cars, basically everything that should never share space with bullets. Miss your shot, and it's not just a fine. It's a tragedy and a headline no one wants. There's a dark irony too. Cemeteries already contain targets in the worst possible sense, so bringing a gun into that space feels like going out of your way to make something solemn even worse. This law exists to draw a line that shouldn't need debate. If you're even considering hunting between headstones, the problem isn't a lack of opportunity, it's a lack of basic social awareness. 16. If you've ever thought the law sometimes sounds like a preschool teacher giving safety rules, here's your proof. In some places, it's illegal to shoot birds sitting on power lines. It feels obvious until you remember. Obvious is the first thing people forget the moment they're holding a gun. A bird perched on a wire looks like an easy target. The problem is that the power line is not a shooting range, and electricity is not a joke. One bullet can snap a line, cause a short start a fire, or just knock out power for an entire neighborhood. Imagine thousands of people losing electricity fridges off Wi Fi dead everything dark because someone decided to take a shot at a bird taking a break. This law isn't here to protect birds from lazy hunters. It's here to protect infrastructure from impulsive decisions. And honestly, it's also here to protect you from the moment you have to explain to a police officer, I was only aiming at the bird. I didn't mean to shoot the power grid. By that point, the bird is gone and you're still there with the bill and a very expensive lesson. 17. There's a way to turn hunting into easy mode without learning a single skill. Bring a spotlight strong enough to personally offend the night. You sweep it across a field or the edge of the woods. An animal's eyes bounce back like two glowing dots, and for a few seconds it freezes blinded while you line up the shot. Congratulations, you just created a nearly stationary target with a light switch. That's why a lot of places ban spotlighting while you've got a weapon. Not because light is evil, but because it wrecks the whole idea of fair chase, the thin layer of ethics that lets hunting call itself a sport instead of a shortcut. Normal hunting involves reading signs, watching wind, walking missing, going home empty handed, and telling yourself next time. A spotlight skips all of that. If experience can be replaced by a beam of light, the outcome isn't about skill anymore, it's about batteries, bulbs, and how fast you can pivot your wrist. The law shows up to remind people that the woods aren't a menu you shop from with a flashlight. 18. Somebody looked at the water and thought, I'm going to catch fish like it's the Middle Ages. Enter the crossbow. In some places, bow fishing with a regular bow can be allowed, but crossbows are banned. Sounds weird until you realize what the crossbow does. It makes the whole thing a little too easy and a little too low effort. With a traditional bow, you're pulling the string yourself. Holding tension, timing the shot, coordinating your body, there's real form involved. A crossbow turns that into cock it once, keep it ready, then pull the trigger when you see a fish. You don't have to hold that strain the same way, and it's less dependent on stability in the moment. In short, it swaps some skill for mechanics. And then there's safety. An arrow skipping off water doesn't always stop where you want it to. Refraction messes with your aim fish move, and where you think it is can be somewhere else entirely. Crossbows tend to give people more confidence than the situation deserves, and laws are basically allergic to that kind of confidence. 19. If you think the biggest sin in fishing is impatience, Oregon would like to update that belief. In many waters, using corn as bait can actually get you fined. It sounds like a nutrition lesson, but it's written into fishing regs. Corn feels harmless, cheap, easy to carry, and fish go for it like kids seeing candy. The problem is a lot of fish, especially salmon and trout, don't digest corn well at all. They'll eat it sure, but it can pass through like an unwelcome house guest and cause blockages or weaken the fish. So you're not just luring them, you're feeding them something their bodies can't really handle. So instead of effective bait, corn gets treated like river fast food, tasty up front, ugly later. The rule forces anglers to use more appropriate bait, not just whatever's most convenient in the kitchen cabinet. It's also a reminder that nature doesn't run on. If the fish likes it, it's fine. Fish like plenty of things. Humans do too. And sometimes that liking is exactly why the government steps in. 20. Alabama has plenty of entertainment options: football, hunting, fried food, and arguments about who grills better. But there's one thing: the law had to shut down wrestling bears. Picture a guy walking into an arena like he's about to step into an MMA fight, and his opponent is a several hundred-pound bear with a slap strong enough to turn confidence into a life lesson instantly. The law is clear: you can't exploit bears for wrestling matches. It sounds like a joke, but it's written seriously because at some point people actually did this as a show. The problem isn't only cruelty to animals, it's cruel to logic. Bears don't compete under sports rules, they react on instinct, and their instinct doesn't include stop when the ref counts. This law protects bears from being used for profit, and it also protects humans from voluntarily walking into a situation where the most realistic ending is an ambulance. If the government has to remind you not to wrestle a bear, you've already wandered pretty far from the definition of entertainment. 21. Some states in America took better safe than sorry to a truly iconic level. They banned whale hunting. In states with no ocean, Utah and Oklahoma are the kind of places where you can drive for hours without seeing a single serious drop of salt water, yet the law still goes out of its way to say you may not hunt whales. It sounds like someone copy-pasted maritime law and forgot to delete a line, but it actually captures a very lovable kind of bureaucracy. If there's a list of things you're not allowed to do, you might as well ban the whole set. Ban it now, argue never. Because somewhere out there is always a person willing to get creative, towing a whale with a pickup, keeping one in a salt pond, or claiming an aggressively large dolphin counts as a whale for bragging rights. The law's trying to kill those ideas while they're still eggs. And the best part, this law doesn't need to be enforced often to be useful. It exists as a mental fence. No matter what apocalyptic scenario you come up with, sea levels, rising storms, dropping seafood inland, a whale taking a wrong turn, the government's first instinct is still, no, don't do that. 22. Picture a harvest morning, a combine, humming along grain, pouring in dust everywhere, the driver sitting high up like they're piloting a giant agricultural robot. Now add one small detail, a gun. In North Dakota, the law is very clear: you can't hunt from the seat of a combine. Not because anyone hates efficiency, but because someone looked at a field and thought, this is perfect, harvest the crop and take a shot at that bird while I'm at it. The problem is that a combine isn't a watchtower and harvest season isn't a survival game. You're operating a heavy machine with spinning blades, limited visibility people, and vehicles nearby. Basically a situation that becomes instantly chaotic the moment you add gunpowder. This law also blocks a very specific kind of overachiever energy trying to bring home both grain and a trophy in the same shift. But hunting demands focus and farming does too. Combining them creates a brand new activity that's dangerous and impossible to explain in court. The state is asking for one simple thing: pick a job at a time. Farm is farm. Hunt is hunt. 23. There's a very modern moment where hunting gets translated as logging in. You sit at home, open a laptop, watch an animal on a webcam miles away, then click a mouse to fire a real gun mounted on a remote rig. Technically, you fired a shot. Practically, you just turned nature into a live stream with a buy now button. That's why Texas and other places ban remote internet hunting. The problem isn't just ethics, it's that the entire concept of hunting gets flipped upside down. Hunting is supposed to mean going outside, dealing with the weather, walking, failing, and accepting that the animal has the right to not cooperate. Webcam hunting only requires stable Wi-Fi and a swivel chair. If the stream lags, the animal got away stops being a story and becomes a technical issue. This law is basically saying clicking a mouse is not a wilderness skill. If you can collect a trophy while still in pajamas and air conditioning, that's not hunting. That's remote control with live ammunition, and the law tends to dislike video game logic in a world with real consequences. 24. In your head, cowboy fishing looks perfect, sitting on a horse, one hand on the reins, one hand casting into a stream, sunlight hitting the wide brim hat, basically a big budget Western poster. In real life, Utah looks at that and says no. You can't fish while riding a horse. It sounds like it ruins the romance, but the reason is way less romantic: safety and control. Horses have opinions. Water is slippery. Fishing line tangles. And when you try to do all of it at once, one little jerk on the line can turn relaxing fishing into accidental stunt show. You can spook the horse, you can fall, you can drag your rod and your dignity straight into the water. The law isn't banning horses near streams. It's asking you to do one thing at a time. Want to ride, ride. Want to fish, get off the horse. Utah isn't anti-cowboy. They're anti the idea that you can control a several hundred-pound animal while negotiating with fish balanced on a saddle that has the traction of a New Year's resolution. 25. There's a thin line between I'm fishing and I've become the reason a law exists. In Oklahoma, that line might start with your shoes. Yes, there's a rule against fishing with shoes. It sounds like a joke until you realize someone actually tried it, and probably tried it in more than one way. You can picture the methods wading into shallow water and stomping fish like it's whack-a-mole, using a shoe like a scoop net, swiping through the water with full faith in physics, or turning a shoe into a homemade trap tied to a string like you're inventing footwear-based hunting technology. No matter the version, it stops being fishing and becomes a dispute between fish and sandals. It's not just unsporting, it's unsafe. Wet rocks are slick, sharp edges exist, and gravity doesn't care how motivated you are. This law exists to remind you of something painfully simple. Shoes are for walking, not catching fish. If your plan starts with the words, "What if I use my shoe?" Pause and take a breath. 26. There's a fishing method that sounds like a weird trend you'd hear about: online tickling. You slide your hand under the bank where a fish is hiding, rub its belly until it goes kind of limp, and then you just Lift it out. If petting a fish until it gives up already feels a little off, congratulations, you understand why some places banned it. Tickling isn't normal hand fishing. It's basically exploiting a fish's reflexes touch the right spot, and the fish slows down, gets confused, and loses awareness. You're not winning because you picked the right bait or made a great cast. You're winning because the fish is stuck in the mental state of wait, what is happening to me right now? And then there's the practical part. You're reaching into a dark, slick, muddy place where you're not 100% sure you're touching a fish and not something with teeth spines or attitude. Banning tickling protects the sport aspect, but it also protects both sides. The fish doesn't get caught in the most vulnerable way possible, and you have a lower chance of turning a fishing trip into a tetanus shot appointment. If your fishing method requires getting that intimate in the mud, it might be time to go back to using a rod. 27. Nighttime has a special power. It can make bad ideas feel oddly reasonable, like bringing a gun to the water after dark to hunt fish faster. And because enough people took that seriously, the law had to join the conversation. Banning shooting fish with a firearm after dark isn't because fish have a bedtime. It's because you can barely see what you're shooting at. Water reflects light shadows mess with your depth. Perception fish move, and human brains are extremely confident with extremely little information. The result usually isn't one clean shot, nice catch. It's one shot at something that absolutely shouldn't be shot, a rock bank, somebody else's boat, a sign, or just a general direction near a sound. People love to say, I'll just use a flashlight. A flashlight doesn't turn you into a sharpshooter. It just helps you see more clearly how dangerous your plan is. This rule exists to stop a relaxing activity from turning into random gunfire in the dark. If your plan relies on the phrase, it'll probably be fine, the law already has a shorter response, no. 28. There's a point where hunting starts looking like consumer tech when your rifle has more features than your phone. Smart rifles with computerized scopes can range targets, calculate wind, compensate for drop lock on, and basically guide you into the shot. Sounds like the future. And in some places, lawmakers said, no thanks. This isn't anti technology. The issue is that it replaces the most important part of hunting human error. Hunting is a mix of skill, patience, and sometimes missing because the wind shifts at the worst possible second. A smart rifle turns that into math, then shows you the answer on a screen. When the machine does the hard part, you're not really the hunter. You're just the person making sure the device doesn't fall over. And there's also the slippery slope. If today a computer helps you aim what's tomorrow, remote control, auto trigger, automatic billing. Banning this stuff is about drawing a line. Hunting is humans in nature, not point and click with live ammunition. If your trophy depends on an algorithm, the trophy belongs to the algorithm. 29. Want to turn hunting into a motorsport? Easy, start up a snowmobile and chase an animal like it's a rally race. It sounds efficient if you're obsessed with speed, but Minnesota and plenty of other places said absolutely not. And it's not just about fairness. A deer running through deep snow is already working hard. You showing up on a machine with an engine traction and acceleration means it's no longer hunting, it's vehicle pursuit. You can exhaust an animal, panic it, and it can die from stress even if you never fire a shot. If your main skill is keeping up with horsepower, hunting has been replaced with mechanical advantage. Then there's safety. Snow hides holes, stumps rocks, anything hard enough to end your day with one bad bounce. Racing on a track has barriers. Racing through the woods has destiny. This law exists to remind people that winter isn't the season for chasing wildlife with machines. If you need speed, there are places for that. Don't turn animals into pylons. 30. Some laws sound like they were born from a meeting where someone said, do we need to ban pushing a moose out of an airplane? And for whatever reason, nobody laughed it off. In Alaska, the law apparently felt the need to make that one extremely clear. First, consider the main character, a moose. A full-grown moose can weigh hundreds of pounds and stands like a small car with antlers. Now put that inside a small plane. Even before we get to the pushing part, you've already built an aggressively unreasonable situation. But the law doesn't care about your method. The law cares that someone somewhere had enough imagination to make this scenario feel possible. It lives in the same family as rules against aerial hunting, no using aircraft to herd, harass, or handle animals in a way that turns nature into a game for people with vehicles. This law reads like a sign written in pure exhaustion. If your plan starts in the air and ends with shoving a massive animal toward the ground, stop at the part where you opened the plane door.